Good morning and welcome to the Breakfast News on Rajya Sabha television. I'm Ashwarya Kapoor. Let's bring you the headlines first. At least 21 people killed as Mali hotel hostage crisis ends. 20 Indians who were among 170 hostages evacuated safely. Group affiliated to Al-Qaeda claims responsibility. UN Security Council unanimously adopts a French proposed resolution asking nations across the world to unite against Islamic State. No approval, however, of military action. Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Kuala Lumpur to attend ASEAN Summit. Terrorism, trade, the sea dispute top agenda. Madheshi protesters in Nepal torch ambulance and truck carrying medicines worth over 2 million rupees. This even after their assurance that they will allow movement of medicines and let schools function. And more rain predicted in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. The death toll in Tamil Nadu from rain-related incidents touches 120. 35 die in neighbouring Andhra. The top story, the Mali hotel hostage standoff has ended. At least 21 people were killed in counter-attacks after government troops stormed into the building to free hostages. Islamist group affiliated to Al-Qaeda has claimed responsibility for the attacks. 20 Indians were also among the 170 hostages. All of them have been evacuated safely. A state of emergency has been declared in Mali.
Malian commandos and UN security forces stormed into Hotel Radisson Blu in Mali's capital Bamako, launching counterattacks to take over the hostage situation. The hotel has been cleared and premises secured. On Friday, a group of armed gunmen shouting "God is great" took nearly 170 people as hostage in the hotel. Al-Morabiton, an African jihadist group, has claimed responsibility for the attacks. They are a terror group affiliated to Al-Qaeda.
Comme j'ai eu à dire, les spécialistes sont en train de s'occuper vraiment de ces blessés-là. Un a été opéré, les autres sont en cours de traitement. Pour le moment, Dieu est avec nous vraiment. Quand nous voyons tout ce que nous avons eu à subir depuis 2012, on va dire un grand merci au Tout-Puissant. Il continue à protéger, il le fait. On prie pour que...
All 20 Indians who were among the hostages have been evacuated safely. Several foreign nationals were also among the hostages. The US-owned hotel is popular with foreign businesses and airline crews. Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has announced a state of emergency for 10 days and 3 days of national mourning.
Que depuis ce matin, déjà à 6 heures, l'hôtel Radisson fait l'objet d'une attaque par un certain nombre d'individus qui ne sont pas encore identifiés, mais tout porte à croire qu'il s'agit d'attentats terroristes.
Condemnation poured in from across the world. US President Barack Obama said that they are monitoring the situation.
The Colonel condemns the horrific terrorist attacks at the Radisson Hotel in Bamako, which killed an unknown number of civilians and injured many more. He expresses his sincere condolences to the government of Mali and the bereaved family and wishes a speedy recovery to the wounded victims of this attack.
We're monitoring the situation.
We are taking all the necessary steps in order to solve that crisis. A crisis unit has been installed in the embassy in Mali and in the Quai d'Orsay in France.
Security officials have not been able to establish any direct link with Paris attacks as it comes just a week after that. However, reports suggest that an IS militant in Syria said French military intervention in Mali is one reason to attack France and French interests. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
All right, let's get a perspective on that story. Mr. Nitin Gokley, who's a senior fellow with the Vivekananda International Foundation. He's a senior defense journalist, is now joining us on the phone line. Good morning, Mr. Gokley, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. Mr. Gokley, of course, while most of the global attention has been focused on Nigeria, where Boko Haram is there, Mali really has been West Africa's other insurgent hotspot really in recent years, and now we have this attack. What do you make out of it?
Yes, good morning. First of all, this attack is, of course, not yet proven that it is linked to anything to do with the Paris attack just a week ago. But the fact is, Mali has been in turmoil since 2013, and the French authorities had gone and intervened there militarily in the north of the country, and therefore the groups there, the Islamic terrorist groups affiliated to Al-Qaeda, have been fighting the French military, and they've been trying to make inroads into capital Bamako for almost two and a half years. So, although there is no direct link to the IS attacks in Paris, there could be a sort of reaction to what happened in Paris and the subsequent crackdown on the Islamic militancy or terrorism in Paris itself. Perhaps these groups who have loose ties with each other, who draw inspiration from each other, may have wanted to make a point to the French that they are still active here and they can sort of kill and plunder at will. So that could be one reason. But the other reason is, of course, internal, that the fight between the government in Mali and the rebels in the north is an ongoing fight. There's an ongoing turmoil. So it could just be part of that ongoing turmoil. So therefore, it is a proven fact that in African nations, apart from Boko Haram, there are these small groups which also continue to be very active, and they strike at will wherever they want. And this is the problem with law enforcement authorities, that the terrorists will always have the advantage of choosing time and place. And obviously they are choosing soft targets, hotels, resorts, or even workplaces. So therefore, we'll have to now see how the Western nations sort of respond to this, and how do the African nations cooperate in that fight against militancy.
What could be the repercussions, considering that the French forces are trying to push the militants away in this area, and also the UN peacekeeping forces there, it has suffered more casualties really than any another in the recent years. What could be the possible repercussions now?
The repercussions would be that there would be more bloodshed, there will be more violence there really, and because the government of Mali is supported by the Western coalition, or rather the French government, they will continue to try and push the rebels out of their own country. But in Africa and as elsewhere, the rebels have free sanctuaries. They can cross over from one border to the other with ease, and therefore it will have to be a coordinated approach with Mali's neighbors, and of course hit out at the root of their sustenance, that is finance. All those measures will have to be taken, but the implications are that security will be further tightened. A lot of the old methods will have to be reviewed of countering terrorism, and the violence and the crackdown will continue, I guess.
All right, Mr. Gokley, you stay with us. We'll just come back to you on another story. Meanwhile, a French proposed resolution calling upon member states to take necessary measures on the territory under control of the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq has been adopted unanimously by the UN Security Council. All the 15 members of the UNSC voted in favor. The resolution, however, does not authorize any military action against the Islamic State.
Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2015/890 please raise their hand?
A unanimous vote for a French-sponsored resolution at the UN Security Council. The resolution calls on all nations to redouble and coordinate action to prevent further attacks by the Islamic State terrorists and other extremist groups.
The result of the voting is as follows. The draft resolution received 15 votes in favor. The draft resolution has been adopted unanimously as Resolution 2249 of 2015.
The resolution says the Islamic State group constitutes a global and unprecedented threat to international peace and security. It also expresses the Council's determination to combat by all means this unprecedented threat.
La résolution que nous venons d'adopter reconnaît le caractère exceptionnel de la menace de Daesh. Il appelle tous les États membres à prendre toutes les mesures nécessaires pour éradiquer le sanctuaire que Daesh a créé en Syrie et en Irak.
While the resolution calls on UN member states that have the capacity to do so to take all necessary measures against the Islamic State group and all other violent extremist groups, to eradicate the safe havens they have established over significant parts of Iraq and Syria, it does not constitute an authorization for military action. Because the resolution is not drafted under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, that is the only way the UN can give a green light to the use of force.
Today we sent a clear, unambiguous message that there will be no respite from our collective efforts to stop, suppress and destroy ISIL. Whether in the streets of Paris or Beirut, or in the skies above the Sinai, ISIL's brutality knows no bounds and respects no borders. ISIL's determination to carry out attacks around the world must be met by our greater resolve to defeat them wherever we find them.
We are facing indeed an unprecedented threat. So with this resolution, we have, as I said, the legal and political framework to mobilize and unify the entire international community in the existential threat and fight against Daesh.
The resolution, which is the 14th terrorism-related resolution adopted by the UN's most powerful body since 1999, was adopted a week after the Paris attacks, in which 130 people were killed. The IS has claimed it has carried out the attacks. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
All right, let's go back to Mr. Gokley. Mr. Gokley, now, as far as this resolution is concerned, now France's ambassador to the UN has called this resolution historic. But looking at beyond the theatrics, what do you think is this resolution going to achieve?
Well, I won't go to the extent of calling it theatrics, but the issue is that the world has been grappling with the issue of defining terrorism. And as you just heard in your own report, that there have been more than 14 resolutions regarding terrorism and trying to fight terrorism the world over. Unfortunately, there are so many differences of opinion between major world powers on how to fight terrorism, where to fight terrorism. And therefore, the fight against terrorism has always fallen short or has gone the other way, which is a heavy hand where that heavy hand was not required. So therefore, the French authorities will have to really look at their own systems and methods on fighting terrorism, and also, of course, have a simultaneous soft approach towards de-radicalization and integration of many of the migrants who have come in or refugees who have come into their own country. But this problem is no longer limited to the French soil or to a particular country in Europe, but it is linked to what is happening in Syria. So therefore, the world will have to come up with the answer of how to resolve the Syrian issue first, and then look at the measures which are always temporary as far as counter measures are concerned, or crackdowns on terrorist groups are concerned. The root will have to be also looked at, and how to resolve that root cause, or the root of the problem will have to be solved before we think of a final solution.
Well, you just mentioned about Syria, but the point is that Security Council member nations are themselves divided over the future of the Syrian ruler, Mr. Assad. So under that circumstances, what kind of really unanimity can we expect on that issue?
Well, I'm not looking at unanimity at all, but if Russia wants Assad to stay and the US does not want Assad to stay, then there is a problem. So therefore, there will have to be some reconciliation between the opposing views that exist between the major nations. But before all that, I think the violence and the bloodshed will have to stop, because that bloodshed and violence excuse me, has resulted in millions of refugees streaming into Europe, which in turn leads to other social problems in these small societies in Europe. So therefore, the effort should be first to have some kind of a ceasefire or cease the violence and bloodshed, so that refugees don't pour into other countries and create their own problems. So I am not very sure if there is any immediate solution. But certainly, the big countries will have to put their heads together and come up with some temporary measures, and then look at a long-term roadmap.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Gokley, for joining us and sharing your perspective on that story. Well, in other news, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, along with other world leaders, are in the Malaysian capital Kuala Lumpur to participate in the 13th ASEAN-India and the 10th East Asia Summits. Now, enhanced economic ties and security cooperation remains high on agenda during the 13th ASEAN-India Summit today. Well, apart from the two summits, Modi will also hold bilateral talks with his Malaysian counterpart and other world leaders. Modi is also slated to address the Business and Investment Summit today, where he wants to emphasize the need for closer economic cooperation and investment opportunities.
The rise of in non-traditional security threats, ASEAN and India are looking to work closely in addressing terrorism, human and drug trafficking, cybercrime and piracy along the Malacca Straits.
Issues on the mind of Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he landed this morning at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport to participate in two weekend summits. The ASEAN-India Summit today and the East Asia Summit on Sunday. In a tweet, the Prime Minister said, "Reached Kuala Lumpur, today's programs include ASEAN Business and Investment Summit, 13th ASEAN-India Summit and one-to-one meetings." Modi, along with world leaders, are expected to take note of new plan of action to further cooperation along the political, security, economic and socio-cultural pillars.
Leaders are expected to discuss matters of international concern that includes terrorism, irregular migration, the South China Sea, Korean Peninsula, the Middle East situation, etc.
Meanwhile, the shadow of terror looms large over the Malaysian capital. Malaysia has put in place extraordinary security measures after a leaked police memo warned 10 suicide bombers had entered the capital city. Meanwhile, as with the recent G20 summit in Turkey, the discussions at the two summits in Kuala Lumpur are also expected to be dominated by terrorism in the wake of devastating Paris attacks that killed more than 130 and Friday's storming of a hotel in Mali by terrorists.
Deployed over 3,600 security personnel for this purpose, and if necessary, we added more.
Another issue in light of, for example, the Paris attack about a week ago would be the more cooperation in terms of the anti-terrorist exercises, for example.
As part of the coalition to fight ISIL, I think can be extraordinarily helpful, particularly as the Prime Minister mentioned, in issues like countering the destructive and perverse narrative that's developed.
Apart from terrorism, US is also likely to bring up the issue of dispute over South China Sea as ASEAN countries try to balance their ties with the US, China and Japan.
This desire to, number one, make sure South China Sea remain peaceful, and number two, doing our best to make sure that the two superpowers, the United States and China, they don't go into open conflict with each other.
Apart from the two summits, Modi's visit to Malaysia will see him attending a community reception with the Indian diaspora. Modi will also join a program for inaugurating the Torana Gate, an intricately carved gateway in a Kuala Lumpur suburb, and will also interact with corporate Malaysia. From Malaysia, Modi will travel on 23rd of November to Singapore. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Well, our correspondent Akhilesh Suman is in Kuala Lumpur right now. Let's go across to him. Akhilesh, now, so far, as far as ASEAN summits are concerned, it has always focused on economic issues. But this time, just like the Turkey G20 summit, it seems that the terrorism is going to be the top agenda. Akhilesh, can you hear me? Well, we'll try to connect back to my colleague Akhilesh Suman there. He's in Kuala Lumpur. Remember, it is going to be a crucial day because Modi and other world leaders are going to be in Malaysian capital. Modi, in fact, landed this morning at Kuala Lumpur, and they are participating in the 13th ASEAN-India and the 10th East Asia Summit. So there are two summits. So one is today and the other will be tomorrow. As far as the agenda is concerned, there's going to be economic issues and security cooperation that remains high on the agenda during the 13th ASEAN-India Summit today. Apart from these two summits, Prime Minister Modi will also hold bilateral talks with his Malaysian counterpart, Najib Razak. He will also have one-to-one meetings with other world leaders as well. Apart from that, Prime Minister Modi is slated to address the Business and Investment Summit today. All right, Akhilesh Suman, I believe, is with us at the moment. Akhilesh, now trade issues, economic issues have always have been on top of the ASEAN summit agenda. But this time it seems that terrorism is going to take the center stage again.
Exactly. This is what has happened before the G20 summit. And now before ASEAN summit, you can see that there has been firing in Mali and more than 10 people, around 18 people has been died. So I think that some elements are there who are trying to distort the whole economic cooperation agenda in the world. And that is why naturally terrorism is taking the center place in whole the multilateral organizations where people are talking about not only about terrorism, also about how terrorist activities, how mindset of terrorists are being propagated by the internet, by the social media, and also in the society. So it is one of the major agenda in this ASEAN summit is also of the extreme violence, extremism and violence, and they are trying to create certain mechanisms so that social reconciliation process and moderation can be increased in the society. Yes, Arya.
Right, Akhilesh, thank you so much for those details. We'll keep coming back to you for more on that story. And with this, we'll take a very short break. We'll be back with more news. Stay with us.
Today, we will discuss why the Supreme Court quashed the government's decision to provide reservation to the Jat community.
We feel that the Jat community is not a backward. That is why we went to the Supreme Court and filed our petition against that decision.
Political strong होने से उसकी जाति पे जो आरक्षण का जो पैमाना है उस पे फर्क नहीं पड़ता।
Jat is included in this. How can other castes will suffer? Or on what ground?
Watch Law of the Land on Rajya Sabha television.
Well, more rains has been predicted in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh as both the states continue to reel under flood-like situation due to heavy rainfall. The toll from the rain-related incidents in Tamil Nadu increased to 120, while 35 people have died in Andhra Pradesh. There will be little relief from rain in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh as Met Department has predicted more rains in the states. The incessant rains have killed 120 people in Tamil Nadu and forced more than 70,000 people to move to relief camps. In some areas, knee-deep water entered the houses as hapless residents struggled without any help.
அதனால தண்ணியே நிறைஞ்சு இருக்குது. இந்த தண்ணி நிறைஞ்சதுனால எங்க சொந்த பணத்தை போட்டு கூட நாங்க மோட்டர் வச்சு அந்த தண்ணியை எடுக்கிறோம். அந்த தண்ணியை எடுத்து அந்த பக்கம் விட்டு அந்த ஏரியா ஆளுங்க வந்து ஏன் இந்த பக்கத்துல தண்ணி எடுத்து வந்து விடுறீங்க அப்படின்னு அவங்களே எங்க கிட்ட வாக்குவாதம் பண்றாங்க.
Tamil Nadu Chief Minister J. Jayalalitha said 9 persons had been killed in the last 4 days, with the victims mainly hailing from Chennai and Kanchipuram districts. She announced a relief of 4 lakh rupees each to the families of the victims. Despite some relief from the rain on Friday, the Met Department has forecast moderate rains on Saturday.
Forecast for next 24 hours is concerned, it is likely to rain at many places in the coastal districts and at few places in the interior districts. 1 or 2 places in the interior districts may experience heavy rainfall. As far as Chennai city is concerned, it will be partly cloudy and rain will occur in some areas.
Rain has also caused havoc in Andhra Pradesh with 35 people dying due to rain-related incidents. Nellore and Chittoor districts of the state have been severely affected due to floods. Keeping in view the devastation caused by the floods, Chief Minister N. Chandrababu Naidu has sought 1,000 crore rupees immediate relief from the centre to overcome the crisis. National Disaster Response Force, Navy and Air Force have been carrying out rescue operations since Tuesday and distributing food and water packages to marooned people. Around 12,000 people have been evacuated by the Army and the Air Force in Chennai. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And now a look at what is expected to make news through the day today in the day ahead. 2 Lok Sabha seats and 5 Assembly seats will go to polls today. Lok Sabha seats which are going to polls are Ratlam in Madhya Pradesh and Warangal in Telangana. By-poll in Ratlam follows the death of BJP MP Dilip Singh Bhuria, while in Warangal it was necessitated by the resignation of Telangana Deputy Chief Minister K. Srihari. The counting of votes will be held on 24th of November. Maldivian Foreign Minister Dunya Maumoon will arrive today to hold talks with her counterpart Sushma Swaraj. She is expected to apprise Sushma Swaraj on recent emergency measures imposed in the country earlier this month, citing threats to citizen safety and national security. President Pranab Mukherjee will inaugurate the first ever 3-day World Indology Conference at Rashtrapati Bhavan today. External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj and President of ICCR will participate in the event. A distinguished Indologist award will be presented by the President to Professor Heinrich from Germany on the occasion. News from Nepal, where Madheshi protesters torched an ambulance and a truck carrying medicines worth over 2 million rupees imported from India near the border as the sporadic violence returned amid a logjam over the new constitution. The truck loaded with medicines was torched by the Joint Democratic Madheshi Front. This comes after their statement that they would allow movement of the medicine-laden trucks and would let the schools function normally. Now, Nepal has been hit by a major political crisis over the new constitution opposed by Indian origin Madheshis who have led an agitation and blockades at key border trade points of Nepal with India, leading to a shortage of essential goods, including fuel and cooking gas. The agitation by Madheshi groups has paralyzed normal life across Nepal, while the dearth of medicines for the past 2 months has put lives of patients at risk. And more international news now in World Wrap. French security officials have said that Hasna et Boulkhan, the cousin of the presumed ringleader of last week's Paris attacks, did not blow herself up in the police raid as previously thought. The comment came as the third body was recovered from Saint Denis. They say the suicide bomber was a man. However, Hasna was also killed in the police raids. Meanwhile, Russia has intensified airstrikes against Islamic State in Syria. Reports suggest that they have raised the number of aircrafts to 69. The long-range missiles were launched from Caspian Sea warships. However, President Putin said that the current level of attacks was not enough to defeat the Islamic State. In a rare admission of its kind, the US took responsibility for the civilian killings in Iraq during an airstrike against Islamic State early in March. One child was also killed among the 4 people. Air Force officials at the US Central Command have been investigating the airstrikes. They found that the checkpoint was a legitimate target and all reasonable measures were taken to avoid unintended deaths. But the presence of civilians could not be detected until the warplane had launched its weapons. Former US Navy analyst Jonathan Pollard has been released from jail. He was imprisoned in 1987 for passing classified information to Israel. Under the parole, Pollard is required to remain in the US for the next 5 years. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed his release. Israel's appeal for Pollard's clemency was rejected several times earlier. Let's now get you all the sporting action in Sports Beat. Ace quister Pankaj Advani entered the semi-final of the IBSF World Snooker Championship to assure India of a medal. Advani, who is gunning for his 15th world title, outplayed Maltese Alex Borg 6-0. He will meet now the winner between Ireland's Greg Castley and Lucas Kleckers of Germany. Jos Buttler hit England's fastest one-day 100 to guide them to a 84-run win over Pakistan in the 4th and the final ODI in Dubai. Buttler's 100 of just 46 deliveries, along with opener Jason Roy's maiden century, helped England reach an imposing total of 355 for 5. The English bowlers then bowled out Pakistan for 271 to take the series 3-1. Stan Wawrinka beat Andy Murray in straight sets to reach the semi-final of the ATP World Tour Finals. Wawrinka eliminated Murray with a 7-6, 6-4 win and will now face the compatriot Roger Federer in the last 4. Earlier, Nadal beating fellow Spaniard David Ferrer 6-7, 6-3, 6-4 in a marathon match to maintain his 100% record in the tournament. He will now face the world number 1 Novak Djokovic in the semis. Real Madrid will host Barcelona at the Santiago Bernabeu today. Security measures have been significantly increased following the Paris attacks last Friday. Barcelona's star forward Lionel Messi is likely to make a comeback after 8 weeks of injury. That's all in this edition of Breakfast News. But news and updates continue on your channel. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.